Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Jump On Air. We're so happy you've chosen to spend a bit of your Friday with us as we explore statistics, science, data, and of course, Jump. My name is Julian Paris. I am the Learning Strategy Manager here at Jump Software. And as always, I've had the great privilege to be your host for Jump On Air. And today's a very special episode. Today is the end of our Season 1, and we have a really great lineup of speakers here today to share their stories with you and share their knowledge with you. I'll, as always, refer to this schedule throughout the program to keep us on track. And if you do need to leave, remember that you can always come right back by going to jump.com/jumponair. That'll reconnect you to the live stream. So take us on a run with you, take us up to the kitchen. Jump.com/jumponair is a link to remember. After the show, we hope you'll interact with us at community.jump.com/jumponair. You can watch all of our past episodes. You can interact with our show segments. You can interact with our speakers. Even once we're off air for Season 1, we hope you'll visit community.jump.com/jumponair, catch up on everything you missed, or share any segments you've loved with colleagues. community.jump.com/jumponair. After today's episode, I'm going to be sending out a survey to you, and I really hope you'll take about 5 minutes to fill it out to tell us what you loved about Jump On Air, what you think we can do better, and what you think we should do next. So that survey will be coming to your inbox, the inbox or email address you subscribe to Jump On Air with. So make sure to check for that. It should be coming about 30 minutes after the show, and we'll give you a couple weeks to fill it out. So look for the survey and tell us what you think we can do better. Now, before we get started on our program, I like to start off with a little bit of a segment, usually myself. And today I want to start off with something that I promised for quite a bit of time. Now, a few episodes ago, I talked about a dinner table stats where we looked at both the weak law of large numbers and also hypothesis testing errors. Now, the weak law of large numbers was actually quite a while back. This was episode 10th, April 24th. And I did it because Randall Munroe at XKCD had a great comic where he talked about how taking a lot of garbage together results in less garbage. And that's the weak law of large numbers. Larger samples of even chaotic events gives us an estimate of the truth in the world that's better than any of those unique individual pieces. And we looked at this through a simulation in Jump using the sampling distribution of sample means generator. We're going to check that out again in just a second. But what we essentially showed is that when we take larger and larger groups of observations, the estimate of the population mean got closer and closer to the real truth out there. So the distribution of those samples became narrower. And that's just the weak law of large numbers. Later on a later episode, this was May 8th, I talked about errors in hypothesis testing. And again, because Randall had a great comic about the different types of errors. And remember, the type 9 error was the rise of Skywalker. But we looked at type 1 and type 2 errors. We looked at what would happen if you're performing a hypothesis test and the null hypothesis is true. There's really no effect of whatever you're doing. We saw that the error rate was whatever you set alpha to. So 5% is typically what we do for alpha. And so 5% of the time in the world where there's no effect, you would end up falsely rejecting the null hypothesis, the type 1 error. And we also looked at type 2 errors. What happens in a world where there really is some effect, but because of how you designed your study, or just because of unluckiness, you get a sample where you fail to reject the null and make an error, a miss of a true effect. And we again looked at these through some simulations. Now, after each of those dinner table stats, I promised I would come back to my favorite concept in all of statistics, which is the central limit theorem. And so what I want to do now is take you through the central limit theorem, looking again at those simulations. And to start off, in case you didn't see that previous episode, I want to orient you to this sampling distribution of sample mean simulator. At the top, we have some population of data. In this case, I was complaining on that show about my internet speed, so we were looking at my download speeds, and that population right now is centered at 500 megabits per second with a standard deviation of 15 megabits. And the way this simulation was set up was I have a sample size for each sample I draw. I put 5 as the number of observations, and what we can do is observe when I draw a sample where the sample means land. So in this case, I observed a sample with those 5 observations, and the sample mean was calculated by Jump and plotted in the distribution of sample means below. Now, what's neat about this simulation is I can draw this multiple times. I can just build up the sampling distribution of sample means. And just so we don't have to watch me click repeatedly, I'll put 10,000 as the number of samples to draw with one click. And what we see built up is that distribution of sample means. Pretty cool. Now, we observed a couple things right away. In the population, there are observations way out in the tails. I can observe a single download speed instance of 580 or 540 or 460, but it'd be very weird to observe a sample mean of 5 observations where I got a mean that extreme. And this is just what the weak law of large numbers says. If I put more observations into a sample, I'll do 20. That distribution of sample means becomes narrower and narrower and narrower. The precision with which I estimated the population mean of 500 increases to the point where if I get a large enough sample, let's say the population size, I'll of course perfectly estimate that population mean. Now, the central limit theorem asserts something slightly different. And to see it, we have to change a presumption about the population that I didn't even make explicit before. In this demonstration, I explicitly defined the population as a normally distributed variable. It's actually a shape option I have to the left. Let's imagine the population of all the speeds I could observe is actually shaped differently. Let's say it's a skewed population. Same mean, 500. Same standard deviation, 15, but the observations skew out to the right, such that it's possible I can observe a really, really fast speed, but at a certain point, I will never observe something lower. Maybe that's like AT&T makes sure I never get below 489 megabits per second, but they'll occasionally let me get really fast speeds. Who knows why the process works this way, but let's say that's the population. Now, what do you think is going to happen with my sample means? What do you think shape that will be? Let me put my sample size back down to 5, let's say. If I draw a sample now of 5 observations and I do it 1,000 times over and over, before we saw that nice bell curve shape of the sampling distribution. If I do it now, you'll notice that my sampling distribution has a little bit of a skew as well. You'll see this even in a more pronounced way if I put my sample size down at, let's say, 2. 2 observations per sample, plot the mean, put it in the sampling distribution. 2 observations, plot the mean, sampling distribution. So that sampling distribution ends up looking a lot like the population when I have these small samples. But something rather interesting happens when I increase the number of observations in each of those samples. Let me put 10 in each sample and draw 10,000 samples. I still have a little skew. You can see it if I draw this out to be bigger. But that skew is disappearing. Let's put 20 observations in each sample and draw another 10,000. Still have a little bit of skew, but we're getting a bit more symmetry here. Let's put 60 observations in each sample. So every time I take one of those 10,000 samples, there's 60 download speeds I've measured, and I'm plotting the mean. Now that skew is almost completely gone away. Now, to see this a little more clearly, let's imagine that I made a table because I sat there and kept drawing different size samples and actually put them all in a table and had a table of 1.04 million. So let's say somebody had the time to do that last night. And let's imagine now we build this using a histogram. We'll just use distribution platforms. And I have my filter on the left to filter through the different sample sizes. So this is that sampling distribution when I have 1 observation in each sample. So that's basically recreating the population. When I have 2 observations in each sample, 3 observations, 4 observations, 5, 6, 7, 8, something quite magical is happening. That tail's being drawn in, sure, the skew is decreasing, but the shape of this distribution is not just becoming a symmetric distribution, it's becoming a normal distribution. And this is what the central limit theorem asserts to us. It asserts about nature that regardless of what population I start with small samples, it'll resemble that population shape in the sampling distribution. But very quickly, that sampling distribution will be drawn towards, it's attracted to a very special distribution in statistics, the normal distribution or the Gaussian distribution. And that's not guaranteed by anything in the population. There's no reason that should happen, but it does happen. That is in essence the shape of random noise. And this property, I'll put it in text here so you can see it in just words. The distribution of the sum, or a mean, of a large number of independent random variables approaches a normal distribution. A very easy thing to say, but it's actually a very wonderful and valuable property of nature for us. And I'll talk about why in a second. Now, it's actually one that we didn't know about for quite a long time, until relatively recently in terms of mathematical history. It was actually Abraham de Moivre in 1718 who wrote a pretty influential work, The Doctrine of Chances. De Moivre was a friend of Edmund Halley and Isaac Newton. He was a mathematician, a French mathematician, In the Doctrine of Chances, which was written primarily for gamblers, he talked about the normal distribution as an approximation to binomial processes. So a pretty cool thing, but didn't make a huge splash in mathematics. De Moivre didn't really articulate the central limit theorem in a particularly mathematical way. It was actually rescued from obscurity by someone else, Pierre-Simon Laplace, who in 1820, wrote the Analytical Theories of Probability, in which he really did numerically describe the central limit theorem. He didn't prove it, but he showed it mathematically, and also described the normal distribution along with Carl Friedrich Gauss. It actually wouldn't be until 1901 until the central limit theorem was proved that this property exists. That honor goes to Alexander Lyapunev, who is a Russian mathematician. But this property of nature that draws distributions when they're formed of large sums of independent random events, this is a really magical thing that I think this statement doesn't particularly well capture. And I think to really describe the majesty of it, the profound nature of this, I need to turn to somebody else, which is a person named Sir Francis Galton. Galton, you may know, he named regression. He studied intelligence. He's a second cousin of Darwin. Galton has a storied past, but interestingly, in one of his books, he described the central limit theorem in a way that really only Sir Francis Galton can. And so I want to take a second here and I want to recite this quote for you. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. I want to make sure I get it right. So I'm going to pause for a second. I know of scarcely anything so apt to impress the imagination as the wondrous form of cosmic order expressed by the central limit theorem. The theorem would have been personified by the Greeks and deified had they known of it. It reigns with serenity and in complete self-effacement amidst the wildest confusion. The huger the mob and the greater the apparent anarchy, the more perfect is its sway. It is the supreme law of unreason. Whenever a large sample of chaotic elements are taken in hand and marshaled by the order of their magnitude, a beautiful and unsuspected form of regularity proves to have been latent all along. That's a pretty great description of something that's a pretty wondrous property of our universe. And I mentioned that it's really important and it actually serves us in hypothesis testing, not just because it's beautiful and not because we like our sampling distributions to be normal, but because we rely on them to be normal for a lot of our hypothesis tests. So very quickly, let me go back to that hypothesis testing simulation I showed before. And let's imagine we had samples of size 5 like we did when I was doing my own hypothesis test. But let's imagine that that population was skewed and not normal. Everything else I'll leave the same. My alpha level is set to 0.05. I'm taking samples. I'll do 20,000 so we can get a nice precise estimate of what I'm about to show. If everything was working the way it should, 5% of my samples should accidentally reject the null. The null hypothesis is true here, so my false alarm rate should be 5%. But when I draw samples from that skewed right population, notice that 11.38% of my samples rejected the null. Because what happened is I'm getting samples where I didn't expect to. The sampling distribution shape, remember, with samples of size 5 still had a profound amount of skew. And I wouldn't know this. Remember, I'm playing make-believe here, like I can do thousands and thousands of simulations and understand the truth about the reality I'm in. But when we're doing a hypothesis test, we do just one. We collect our sample and run our hypothesis test and get one p-value. We trust that p-value. In this situation, that didn't work out for us. But what's going to happen when I take samples of, let's say, size 30? That was when the skew of that sampling distribution all but disappeared. I'm going to draw those 20,000 samples of size 30 now. 7%. My sampling distributions are normal enough now where my nominal false alarm rate is closer to what it should be. And let's drive this up to 60. That's when I almost had a perfectly normal sampling distribution. And now when I do this, down to about 6%. Getting closer. What's happening is the central limit theorem is drawing in that sampling distribution of sample means to what we expect it to be based on our hypothesis tests. And so with very large samples, we can trust, no matter what the population looks like, that our distribution of sample means will have that normal shape, so our hypothesis test can essentially be uncorrected. We don't have to worry about the population shape. So the central limit theorem is a very powerful thing in all of statistics. It's a wondrous thing to behold, and it's a property of our reality, our existence, that these sums of random events take on this normal shape. And that is a dinner table stats I think that's worth sharing. It might take you a little bit of time. You have to take people through a number of things, but the central limit theorem is certainly one to share. All right, we have a great show for you today. To kick it off, we have David Spiegelhalter here with Ann Milley to take us through another Meet the Author segment where he talks about his book, The Art of Statistics. Ann and David?
Hello, David. First of all, let me thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know you've been so busy with your activities in the press because you're such an expert on uncertainty and risk and so forth. So how much activity has that spawned for you?
Oh, I mean, this whole COVID crisis, of course, is in a way, it's a gift for risk and science and statistics and communication and uncertainty. Because all those topics are there every day and constantly changing. We're getting new data coming in every day. There's numbers being announced in this country and elsewhere. Everyone's comparing every country with everywhere else, and they want some opinions. And I find the constant demand from media for interviews and to explain things, and it's very good. It's a good opportunity to do things, but it keeps on going wrong. It's just my profile has gone up, which is nice in a way. But sometimes you just get things wrong, or you're not quite clear. And there's people out there with very strong opinions, one way or another, and they will take what you said and frankly misunderstand it. And I think often it's not meant malevolently. They just genuinely. This psychological idea of motivated reasoning, that even very intelligent people will take any information they hear and turn it into something that supports what they believe, and so misunderstand things. And that has happened a few times.
Right.
So I spend most of the time trying to correct the misunderstandings I have created.
Well, it's so fast moving and everybody's so hungry for good data and good thought through analysis. So I think it's nice actually that they reach out to you, that they have you as an expert to reach out to. And it shows how complex it is and how much clarification needs to be made.
Yeah, and it also shows for me how little I know. And one of the problems is with these situations that the media are so hungry for expertise. And I've got a little bit. And the temptation, of course, is to speak outside what you actually feel confident about, or what you should speak outside. So I've actually, the skill I have got very good at is saying, I don't know, that's not my job. I don't do that. And I keep on saying that again and again, for so many aspects of this. So it taught me, and I thought I knew this, but now I really know it. That it's vital to stick to the things you actually know about and just don't say anything about those other things, in spite of interviewers trying to press you to answer those questions. Just say no.
True. Good point. Yes, there are experts in many fields, and thankfully many collaborate, and then we can get progress. But if it's just you on the one thing, well, has this resulted in some good publicity for your latest book, The Art of Statistics?
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, it's good. And, I do try to get it mentioned at the introduction of interviews. They don't always do that, but sometimes they do, and that's good. And no, it's selling well. And I think the lessons from the COVID crisis are the book it's ideal for what's going on at the moment. Because the point of the book is not about fancy technical techniques. There's no maths in it. It's not all about the sort of clever statistical stuff that actually I spent a lot of my career working on. It's about much more basic principles of, we've got a problem. We've got a question we're trying to ask. Is there even any data that can tell us? Maybe it's just not there. Maybe we just cannot know from the data available. Step one, maybe we just can't. We haven't got the data. Then if we have got some data, how good is it? Is it actually saying what it means? At the beginning of the book, I enjoyed writing the bit on, there's a whole thing on what is it? What is a death? I start with, what is a tree? If we're counting trees, we've got to define what a tree is. And that's not always obvious. And a tree in the States is different from a tree in Europe. And then you get on to, and then I say, well, the one thing, of course, you can be sure about is deaths. Oh, my God, in this COVID crisis, a death is not a death. a death in Belgium is not a death in the UK. And it's got so complicated. And those basic misunderstandings of when, every day in this country and other, this many people have died of COVID. No, the one thing you know is that is not the number of people who died from COVID. It may not be today. It might be that they died, maybe they died with COVID, maybe they died with COVID. Maybe, there are lots more people who died that aren't being recorded. So it is so complicated. Right. And I mean, I can go on about this for hours about how people should be monitoring the epidemic. And I do go on about it for hours. But it brings, and basically, I'm not doing any fancy statistics. All I'm doing in my communication work is doing some basic spreadsheet stuff, calculating ratios, populations, rates, trying to work out the best plot, the best visualization that can get over the message very clearly, simple use of color, simple graphics, clearly labeled. Oh my God, the one thing I've learned is do not expect anything to be self-evident to tell the story. People will look at a graph that I think is completely obvious what the story is, and they will totally misinterpret it. So the thing I have learned, which I should have learned before, because many people have said this, you need to, in big print above the graph, say what the essential features are. Yes. And that's very journalistic. And I thought, oh, no, because you don't do that in the academic world. You put up the graph and then some dense bit of text underneath. And people are supposed to draw their own conclusions. No, absolutely. I've learnt my lesson. No, you put in big print, what is the takeaway message from this graph? And and that's not, it's got to be part of the JPEG. It must be part of the image, not just accompanying text. So I'm learning all the time.
We're all learning all the time. Well, and your book you shared with us is actually a textbook in disguise, which I think you're absolutely right, that it's relevant for these times. And if people will read it, they will become better. They'll become more risk savvy and be able to follow these kinds of phenomena with a more learned eye.
I think so. And it's interesting that right at the beginning of the book, I do spend quite a long time on discussing linear against logarithmic scales and their advantages and disadvantages. And that has been a massive issue in this crisis. Do you have a linear or a log scale? Because you can get a totally different subjective impression from those. And when are the one useful and when is the other useful? At the start of an epidemic, when things are increasing exponentially, actually a logarithmic scale is very nice because it turns into a straight line and you can very quickly see what the percentage increase is and compare countries. Whereas comparing these steep curves is extremely difficult. Later on, when you reach plateau, you should be on a linear curve. And also, you should be on a linear curve to show the genuine size of the epidemic. Logarithmic curves are good for comparing trends. They're hopeless for comparing the absolute differences between countries and so on. And so these very basic lessons that now, if I do another edition, I'm going to put all those in because they're fantastic teaching examples for the importance of the every aspect of the presentation, the scaling, and so on. This is an absolute case study in basically the basic statistics. Nothing clever, nothing fancy, except of course I think it is quite clever, and it is not straight, not easy, not obvious.
Right, important. Well, in addition to your book, you have some amazing videos on uncertainty. How did those ideas come to you to create those? Because they're really, I can't recommend them enough. I hope people will check them out at your uncertainty, with communicatinguncertainty.org. Is that it?
Is that understanding uncertainty? Oh, that was. Yeah. I think I like videos. I actually would like to start making quite short. I think one of the things under lockdowns, stuck at home essentially. This probably will be still for a little while. I want to start making some much more simple videos, just explaining things to people, because I do think. The 2-minute video in particular is a very strong teaching tool. And it's something I've come to respect when other people can do it. And it's a bit like Twitter. I mean, I think Twitter is a fantastic literary discipline. I trying to get something down to, 280 characters or something like that is a real struggle sometimes when you've got so much, but it takes me ages to write a tweet. the old thing is, I didn't. I've written you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short letter. I can't remember who said that, but it's so true. It's to be so easy to say things, but having to get things into a tweet. And similarly, knowing that a good YouTube video, I think, should be maximum 3 minutes is a brilliant discipline. Really honing down exactly what you want to communicate. And what's interesting, though, is which I think we might be coming to, is the difference between that and podcasts, which are,
yes,
the videos need to be really short and terse.
right.
But the podcasts now, you can go on in quite a discursive way, 35, 40 minutes, and people will listen to them because they're out walking or they're driving or something else.
I was going to say that, walking the dog.
It is. It's an amazing development just over the last couple of years of these new modes of communication that open up such exciting possibilities. I love them. I love them.
Well, we're excited about your new Risky Talk podcast series, and you've done this excellent one on issues around the coronavirus, uncertainty, and all the data challenges, et cetera.
Yeah.
But you've also done some other interesting topics, and the one on communicating climate change. But which has been the most popular? Yeah,
and we've done genetics as well and official stats, and we're working through the topics. I find them very exciting to do. We've got Ilan Goodman, who's producing them and editing them, does it brilliant. He's very professional. So I don't have to do anything. I can just chat to people. Right. And we've got some great guests. And I love the format of being able to have that a real conversation. I mean, I hope, I think they do sound like a conversation. In fact, we've thought about them very carefully. We've got, quite a tight structure we're trying to keep people to. Because we really are interested in communicating how people communicate uncertainty. How do people communicate that they don't know everything? So communicating risks, of course, but communicating uncertainty. When it came to climate change, because that's unbelievably important, because there are risks clearly, but we don't actually know how big they are necessarily. We don't know what's going to happen. We've got a lot of uncertainty in the models and so on. So how can you communicate that in an open and honest way, and yet essentially remain trustworthy, to demonstrate trustworthiness and, you hope, not lose trust and credibility. I have an absolute belief, and it's been, I think, backed up in the research we've been doing, that if you're careful about it and thoughtful about it, that you can communicate substantial uncertainty without losing trust and credibility. But you have to be careful about it, and you have to think about it, and I think test how you do it.
Yes. It's tricky, and so we admire your efforts to make progress there, because that's such a great need right now.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, especially, you can see already within COVID, the polarization of the community between different viewpoints and the amount of, I think, some lack of trust building up about the government, even about some scientists and things like that. And it's a very delicate business. I try not to take sides at all. In a sense, I try to help everybody. I think one of the advantages, one of the reasons I'm getting away, without being criticized too much publicly, is the fact that I've spent years helping all journalists, whether they work for left-wing newspapers or right-wing newspapers or whatever. I help them all. I try to be polite for them all. And I genuinely, because even the people, in a sense, come from the newspapers you might not read, you still think it'd be a good thing if they use the data better, if they draw better conclusions. It would be better if everybody raised their ability to understand data. You'd still be arguing, but at least you wouldn't be arguing about stupid things. You could be arguing about the real core issues that people might genuinely disagree with. So similarly, when we were working with communicating uncertainty about migration statistics, it's a very, deeply contested topic in the UK as elsewhere. And we were looking at different visualizations. Our psychologist who's working on that, we're looking at users of these statistics. So she was phoning up and talking to, the respectable university department, groups that were studying migration, the civil servants, things like that. And then she was phoning up the anti-migration pressure groups and saying, well, are these helpful? Do you understand them? What do you take away from these things? And that to us, it seemed exactly the right thing to do, that just universally try to help everybody to raise their game in terms of understanding the data. and the necessary uncertainty.
Right. Well, so years ago, the Royal Statistical Society had that Get Stats campaign, and you guys were
Yeah.
targeting journalists and politicians to make sure
Yep.
they got the data right. And that seems to have been really successful, but it's an ongoing thing.
It's a slow business. It's a long slog.
Yes.
But the nice thing about that Get Stats campaign essentially is stopped because it became an integral part of the Royal Statistical Society's mission. It's no longer, I think it was the right thing to do. It's no longer seen as a separate campaign. It is an absolutely integral part of our work. And we now have Royal Statistical Society ambassadors who are doing a fantastic job. One of our ambassadors then got a job as head of statistics at the BBC. And so, we have these, career young statisticians, I think roughly 50-50 men and women, who get some media training and go out there and really have got a personal dedication to trying to improve the way that stats is talked about in society. So they will go on local radio, they'll help journalists, they'll help write, and their names just appear as often just helping organizations with their stats. But also, we're trying to get people to just go into schools. I like retired organizations. They're great, wonderful audiences. I will go and talk to them. But then science fairs and things like that. So there's, just trying to raise that profile of statistical thinking. And I think this COVID thing, awful though it is, it has raised the profile of the importance of decent statistics, decent graphics, and decent data. And I think statisticians are, going to come out of it quite well, I think, on the whole. Maybe better than epidemic modelers, I'm not sure.
Well, the collaboration is happening there too, so that's also encouraging. But it's admirable, the efforts that are being made to make sure people are getting it right, because the data have a context and things are being done differently, and we're learning every day something new. Could you share what some of the upcoming topics that you have planned for Risky Talk?
Oh, yes. Well, we've just recorded one, which I think is going to be excellent, on uncertainty. And it's with a climate scientist, Tamsin Edwards, who it's a very personal conversation. And it reflects her work as a climate scientist in dealing with uncertainty. And her particular characteristic is that she's made a real effort to engage with climate skeptics and really trying to understand what they understand and make friends with them and become an extraordinary figure with her openness and her willingness to communicate. And but she's also had severe bowel cancer, and so she also talks about how she was dealing with the uncertainty and the treatment choice, what treatment choice to have, essentially whether to have chemotherapy or not, or how much chemotherapy to have given the side effects and so on. And so this is, it was just her and me. We're having a very personal conversation because I've had cancer. I've had prostate cancer, and so rather similar decisions that we were both going through and thinking, using our sort of statistical ideas about probabilities, but then not even being quite sure of the probabilities and so on, and the trade-offs you're going to make about any decision, and how much you want to put into it yourself. Mm-hmm. And so, it's going to be very different from the other ones when it comes out. It will be much more of a personal discussion between the two of us. And I felt very privileged to talk to her about this. So I think it'll be quite interesting, because one of the next ones we want to do, we've done genetics and sort of communicating genetic results. But I want to do the stuff that we work on a lot, which is communicating to people with cancer, with bowel cancer or prostate cancer, about the likely survival rates with different forms of treatment, given the type of data that they're providing in terms of their tumor and their age and so on. And so we've been working on that a lot in terms of building interfaces for calculators that are used hugely around the world. And that's a really crucial issue of communication. Yes, because that's what we're talking about all the time, is the communication of risk and uncertainty. And one of the things that when we do that broadcast, I'm looking forward to talking about is one of those issues that's being reported a lot about algorithms and AI. When you have a successful piece of algorithm, with AI based, whatever it's based on, one of the big problems is over trust. It's too good. People get to like it, and people start treating it like some oracle that, this must be right. And that's really dangerous.
Yes.
We are trying to think of ways to, and it's been happening with our software. It looks so beautiful. It looks so good. It seems so reliable, and
We
it is
fall in love with the
consistent.
model.
It says the same. People like it, and people start looking at it, what it says to the second decimal place, and we know it's not that accurate. It's not that great.
Right.
We know that there are lots of other factors that it's not taking into account that in the individual situation might be quite influential. So we're trying to find a way to make people trust the system less, or at least be aware of its limitations so clearly. Yes. So that is something that we've learned about, that you can be almost too successful. You want people to take notice of it, but you don't want people to believe that that's the answer. And so is, I think, a fascinating issue when it comes to the whole development of algorithmic, embodied algorithms.
Yes. So many things you've touched on that are so interesting. So when it becomes such a personal thing, so many people can relate more to that, because it does come down to trade-offs. And you do have to take other things into account, and you're not going to necessarily get the best blend of advice for your situation. So you have to think through those things yourself.
Exactly. And our whole mission, that's the other thing we try to ask in every single podcast. When we talk to the people who are doing the communication, we always ask them, are you trying to inform people, or are you trying to persuade people? And that, inform or persuade. And a lot of people say, we're only trying to inform them. And then you realize, no, you're not. You're trying to persuade them to do something. You're trying to persuade them, to think this way about climate change. You're trying to persuade them to go for screening or something like that. And we think, no, hang on. We're not saying you're wrong if you want to persuade them, but let's be clear. What is your objective? And I used to think I was a fairly black and white division, inform or persuade, and say, okay, well, we are currently on the side of inform. I'm not saying if you want to persuade, that's wrong, but all we want to do is to inform people so they can empower them to make a better decision. It's not so easy, because I realize more and more we are trying to persuade people. We're trying to persuade people to take an interest. We're trying to persuade people to look at this information, and to persuade people you can engage with this decision. You don't just have to either throw up your hands and say, "Oh well, what should I do?" Or just go completely with your guts and say, "Oh, I don't like the thought of that. I'm not going to have that." They say, "No, come on. You do have these options. It is difficult. We're not going to tell you what to do. This is a trade-off. This is a bit tricky, but please try to engage with it." So we are trying to persuade people. But it's a very delicate balance, because we want to persuade them to take an interest, but we want to persuade them to go one way or the other.
Right.
We're not trying to make them go one way. We're just trying to look at it. Look at the balance.
They have control. Some control.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the word empower is slightly overused a bit. So, but I think, take some control, I think is probably a better phrase. Just feel that you've taken some control. So, maybe things will still go wrong, but at least you feel, well, actually, I went for it, and that's it. So, God, I'm so slow at learning these things, but it's very nice being old like I am and still feeling, God, you're learning all the time. And the learning, not the technical stuff that I spent years trying to learn, but just learning about the interface between these, technical ideas, scientific ideas of risk and probability and so on, and real world and people and us, of which I am a member of that real world.
All part of the human condition. Yes.
Yeah, we're all part of the human condition, and I was, and the more you do engage with this, and you keep a little bit of self-reflection going, the more you realize that we all are just utter slaves to our emotions and feelings and prejudices and things like that. Just at least, I think, you can never free yourself from it, but you can at least try to get some self-awareness. Of course, the best way to do that is to get critical friends to point these things out to you.
Absolutely, and to take good sleep so your brain's functioning well, etc.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Well,
David, thank you so much. And I just wanted to point a couple of things out for our audience. So you gave an amazing plenary for us for Jump Discovery Summit that was supposed to have been in Munich, and sadly virtual.
I was looking forward to that.
I wanted our viewers to know that if they want to watch that, they can find that recording on the Jump community. So highly recommend that. And I also want our viewers to know that thankfully we have an excerpt from your book that they can download at jump.com/art of statistics. And it's the part of the book, it's at the beginning, and it's what just pulled me in. So can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you for all your efforts because they're so important. And we're happy to see you in the news because we see you doing good things. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd quite like to be in the news for the right reasons, right? Rather than the latest, problem I've got myself into. So.
Fair point, but you're doing the long haul crusade, so it's all
yeah. I got trying to take the long view. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Yeah.
Take care. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you so much for being with us, David. I'll just echo what Anne said. It's such an important thing that we have people like you out there, advocating for good science and really pushing people and elevating the level of discourse and critique out there in the world. So thanks for all you do. In our next segment, we have Pete and Mary here to do the final tip of the day, where they act out real life scenarios where a jump tip is a solution to a problem.
Thank you, Julian. Yes, this is Pete and Mary for the final tip and trick of the day. So, hey, Pete, how you doing?
Yeah, I shaved today. I took a shower, so better than average. How about you?
I did too. I took off my baseball cap after a week, and here I am. So feeling great.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to everybody that's attended the Jump on Air sessions and have taken an interest in Pete's and my tip and trick session. We've had a lot of fun, and we shared tips and tricks that we thought were useful, would be beneficial for everyone. And with that being said, we'd always like to hear what your favorite tip and trick is as well. And one of the things that I would like to leave folks with, your final tip, maybe it's a trick, who knows, is open jump every day. Whether you do import some data, do some visualization, maybe run a model or two, maybe design an experiment. Just do something every day in Jump, and you yourself will collect your tips and tricks and have more fun with Jump and learn. So be safe, be well, and Pete?
Yeah, I would say I use Jump for many things outside of work, like planning vacations, road trips, analyzing exercise data. So have fun with it. Enjoy this time when you're sort of locked up, or maybe not as much anymore. I don't know. But when you have some time, yeah, definitely learn more about the different platforms in Jump that maybe you haven't used as much. And I'll put in a plug for FDE. That's one of my favorites. So yeah, I would agree with Mary. Check out all different things, and thanks for listening. Thanks for all the positive feedback, Mom.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't know how many surveys we can fill out, Julian, but we definitely want to hear back what you liked, disliked. If you ever want to see Mary and I again, I know my camera doesn't, so but we appreciate the feedback. Some positive, mostly negative, but we love to hear it. So thank you.
We need that 800 number up. right, Blake Shelton, right?
That's right. Well, I think the best thing we can do right now is give Julian a minute back. So
yeah, there you go. Thank you, Julian, for putting this all together, Jump on Air, and thanks for letting Pete and I have a good time with our.
Yeah, we enjoyed it. Thanks, Julian.
Yeah,
back to you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Pete and Mary. Yeah, I'll be sure to put a vote for Pete or vote for Mary segment in the survey for you, so you can find out. But thank you for joining us, Pete and Mary. And yeah, your segments were a favorite among our viewers, we know. So thank you for all the work you've done creating them for us. In our next segment, we have Brady here for his last edition of Ask the Data Doctor, where he's going to take us through thinking like a data doctor yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm just trying to share here, so give me a second just for that. And we should be here. The end. So this is the end of our time together this season, and I really enjoyed this. Thank you for joining us. But as you'll notice on my little slideshow, this is slide 1 of 8. So why do I have that as the first slide? Let me step back here and say that Julian challenged me to do a final segment where I wasn't really solving a problem. I was talking about, what it was like to solve a problem. I was thinking about thinking and trying to, to help people understand, what is it? What's the process I use when I try to do some of these data reshaping problems? Because as many of you know, sometimes you're just looking at data and you're like, I do not know, how I'm going to get from point A to point B here. And so we can debate, whether it's good to try to teach people to think like me. When I mentioned this to my wife and daughter, they were adamant that it is not a good thing to have more people thinking like me. But we'll set that aside for now, and we'll talk about the end. How do I get from point A to point B? Well, it helps to start with point B. And what I mean by that is that I think the first step is to think, what do I want to do with this data? Why am I even sitting here looking at this mess? And what is the end state I want? Because that's critical in JMP especially, because the data shape, and what I mean by data shape is, do I have a tall stack table? Do I have a wide split out table? That's going to depend on which platform you'd like to use and how that platform works. One of the things that was hard for me to get used to when I was using JMP for the first time was this idea of stacking data to do a side-by-side box plot analysis, right? I wanted to do an ANOVA, and so the Fit Y by X platform uses a continuous response and a categorical predictors, categorical Y. And so when I set the data up that way, then I can get my side-by-side box plots and do my ANOVA. In other software I'd used previously, instead of having a single column of categories, each of the measurements in those columns would be broken out in separate columns. And so that took some getting used to. I had to, really consciously think, okay, look, I have to have the data this way before I can go use this platform. And so understanding the types of analyses you intend to do will help you understand, what is this data supposed to look like when I'm all done and ready to do the analysis. From there, then it's a process of considering, well, what are the process flows that might be able to get me there? I'm starting here. I have to get to here. Can I do this in one go with one platform? Can I do this? Do I have to use several platforms? And what are the types of inputs and outputs that each one of those provides? And how can I kind of stitch those together, to get from point A to point B? And so as you consider your options, this is something where experience helps, right? The longer you've used JMP and the more you know about the product, the more you'll be familiar with those different inputs and outputs. So there is that. I mean, when I look at my little girl and how she, she's 9 now, and how she solves a math problem, she's got more tools at her disposal than she did 3 years ago. And it's kind of like that using JMP. I mean, the more you know about JMP and the more experience you have with different pieces of JMP, the more you can kind of cobble those together to do what you're after. So what's likely going to happen is you'll have a variety of approaches, and at each stage, there's going to be pros and cons, and you got to weigh that out. And sometimes it's better to do things in sequence than it is to just try to do it all in one go. It just depends. When we had the show, let me think. I can't remember which episode it was, but we were needing to break text apart, and we had an address. And what was crucial for us was to find a zip code. And then if we could find the zip code and break the data into everything before the zip code and everything that after the zip code, our life was going to get really easy. But the problem was we didn't have a good way to do that. And so what we did was we actually pulled out that zip code and replaced it with a customized delimiter, and then that made our lives easier. So it was a two-step process. We had to recode that zip code into a delimiter of our choosing, and then we could go ahead and use text to columns. In another example, we had discovery papers. I think this was on our first show. And one of the columns always started off with session ID, that same word, but it was 2 words. There was a space there. And so you can imagine that I might have had 3 or 4 words separated by spaces. And the more words I have, the more inconvenient it is for me to modify that column with recodes all but first word functionality. But if I first do a search and replace and put underscores in there, now that becomes a single word. And then I could use recodes all but first word to throw all that out in one go. So in that case, we used the search and replace followed by recode to make our lives much easier than they would have been if we were just using recode alone. So consider that as well. And that really points me to this third bullet is you got to experiment. And it's frustrating because a lot of times when we get a messy data, we're not even expecting that, right? Someone's like, hey, I need you to do an analysis. They shoot something over at us. And then we're like, okay, I've got an hour to do this. And then you look and you're like, and I'm going to spend 45 minutes of that hour trying to clean up this data. So you're like, this is not a good time to experiment. And that is the unfortunate reality. But anytime you can experiment, take the time because it'll pay itself back many, many fold. Finally, never rule out that a little JSL and regex can go an awfully long way. I just actually had a problem where I was trying to do something and it was a multi-step process, and then I just used regex and it just boom, it just took care of it in one go. So it is a learning process, but it's again, it'll pay itself off. So in a nutshell, what should I do? Just keep practicing. You start small, and the more you play around, the more you file away and think, okay, I understand how this works, and I can't use that maybe right here. It didn't do what I wanted, but I've got it for later. And the more of that you collect, it's like your tools in your workshop. Sometimes you'll just have this project and you're like, I got to go buy this tool. And so suddenly a $50 project turns into a $300 project because you had to buy a $250 tool. And then that tool's with you the rest of your life. And so now, suddenly all these options are open because you have this tool. And that's kind of how it is when we're prepping data for analysis. So that's all well and good, and this probably comes as no surprise to anyone who's used JMP for a while, but where should you get started with this? If you're just getting into data science, if you're just getting started with JMP, where would you even begin? There's a lot to ground to cover. So I thought I would kind of go through, different levels, what's a starting level, intermediate level, and then more advanced. And kind of at each stage of the game, give you the 80-20. What's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck as you go through? And so the first thing I would encourage everyone is, if they're just getting started with JMP, start with the basics. If someone asked me, what is it that makes JMP? What is it that makes JMP different from any other software you've ever used and so powerful at saving time? I'd probably come up with a couple of things, but near the top of any list would be the way JMP is able to work with row selections, the way everything's tied together, the way a table is tied to a subset table, the way that those are tied to graphs, the way that I can find something over here, select it, and it's selected back in the table. The better you are with row selection, the better you'll be able to massage data, because the row selection capabilities in JMP offer an extraordinarily powerful way for copying and pasting and moving data. And so the better you are with that, the better you're going to be in general working with JMP. That's the first thing. Just play around with it and see everything you can do. I think you'll be, people that have just used spreadsheets before, they're astonished at the power that JMP has for copying and pasting and just reordering data based on selections. Next up would be to master the tables menu. If you take a look at the tables menu, especially down here all the way to concatenate. Okay, so summary, we got some reshaping, and then join, update, and concatenate. See what those can do for you. This is, I gotta digress here. I sold JMP into a very large company, but it had pockets, there were silos. And this one group, I go to this group, and it's probably 10 analysts or something like that, and they'd been working with spreadsheets. And so they were in a constant position of having to take tool data and reshape, so that they were taking tall tables and had to make them wide and do another couple things along the way. And I kid you not, I sold JMP to them by showing them stack and split. I had this whole talk prepared about all the different other analyses they were doing. And they mentioned this problem about reshaping the data. And I said, oh, yeah, in JMP, you just click, click, click. That was it. End of the discussion. Then we went out for lunch. They're like, that's enough. That paid for JMP right there. That saves us this many hours a week. We're done. We want to hear about all this cool other stuff later, but for now, that's enough. Case made. And I was kind of blown away. I was thinking, well, JMP does so much more than that. But this was a real pain they had. And so learning these table ops is a big part of preparing data. And so that would definitely be the next thing I looked at. Then we got the columns utilities. We spent some time, I don't have a table right here, so I can't show you that menu, but I can make a table. And let's just put fake stuff in there. We worked with the columns utilities like especially text to columns, make indicator columns, and combine columns. Those are going to be very efficient ways of breaking up data, combining it back together, turning things into indicators. We worked with that on one of the shows. So that's another item on this low-hanging fruit list, if you will. And of course, recode. Recodes, there's a lot of stuff in there. And the more of it the better off you'll be, quite simply. And the other thing about recode is it writes its own scripts. So when you've done a recoding, you can actually look at that script, and that's a way to teach yourself a little bit of JSL as well. And you may be able to say, before we had the capability to match outputs with tables and do an update that way with a recoding, you can actually hack a recode script that had been written if you knew a little bit of JSL and make a global search and replace before that function was even available. So, the tricks that you can play, if you know a little JSL and you take these canned scripts that the platforms are writing, it's a surprising increase in capability that comes at little cost. Now, next, I'd say let's go a little step further. Instead of using everything that's prepackaged in a platform, and start writing some formulas or do some transformations. And you saw us using flag columns. They gave us a 0 or a 1 based on selections that we had done, or recodings that we had done, or the presence or absence of certain values in a column. And then we'd give a 1 or a 0. And then that let us go further using things like cumulative sums and ranks, things that were never built really to help you reshape data, but that we could repurpose to reshape data in powerful ways. These are really easy to learn, but it takes a few minutes to think about them and say, okay, I know how to do this. I know how to make it. What can I do with that? What does that do for me? And for us, it boiled down to making really powerful row selections based on the numbers that came out when we built those cumulative sums and when we built those ranks. So, that's kind of the next step, is to start working with formula columns that are creating features, if you will. And some of those are built right into JMP with a right click. You can add a formula column. And some of those you got to think about yourself. Even though it's built in, you'll be using it in a different way, or you might make 3 or 4 flags and then take the product of them, or the sum of them, or the max and min of them. So that's kind of the next step. And then finally, fill in the blanks with some JSL. And here in blue, I've got some of the functions that we use. JSL has lots and lots of functions, but what are the ones that give you the bang for the buck as you're reshaping data? They're these blue ones you see here. We used char and num to go back and forth between numbers and character data and strings. We use the words function and the word function to break those strings up, and concat items to take a list of values and compress it into a single string. We used eval insert. If you remember that show, we had a big messy set of phone numbers, and we wanted to get them in a nice, easy format. And eval insert, along with the words function, they let us do something in a single step that recode couldn't do in a single step, that text to columns couldn't do, that even the two of those couldn't do. It would have taken 3 or 4 iterations to do something that just a little piece of JSL did with the eval insert function and the words function. So, you can combine these things in a really powerful way. Oh, I think we use substitute as well. That's the next one. And then finally, I put parse on here. And the reason I put parse is that what parse does, it takes a string and turns it into JSL that can be executed. You could execute that with the eval statement. So I probably should have put eval on here. But when I use that, sometimes when you're importing data, you see this big, nice, comma delimited file, and you're like, and this kind of gets to my next, not my next bullet, but the one after that, learn the syntax for matrices, lists, and associative arrays. Because sometimes when you look at this data, this delimited data, you're looking and you're like, wow, that's almost the JSL for a matrix. If I just had a bracket in the beginning and a bracket in the end, that would be a matrix. That would, JSL, that's a matrix, and I can turn that into a data table. Well, that's easy enough to do then. With the substitute or the inserts, concatenates, whatever you want to do, you put that bracket on the beginning and end, parse that, now it is JSL, and then you eval that, boom. You just made a matrix. You didn't have to pull out element by element or anything like that. You actually changed a huge string to look like JSL code, and then you just execute that code. So sometimes that can be an extraordinarily efficient way to manipulate data. You saw Peter a few minutes ago talking about analyzing exercise data. That's exactly what I ended up doing. He had some data that the data that came back was kind of nasty from one of the devices he had, and I was taking a look at that to try to clean that up for him. That's exactly what I did. I used parse to take that data and just turn it into code and execute the code. So, learning the syntax for some of the data structures in JMP, super important. The bullet above that, learning to take scripts that these platforms output and just tweak them a little bit to do your bidding. That can be really powerful because platforms sometimes will give you a script and you're like, man, that's so close to what I need. I don't have to write all that code. I'm just going to run this platform, take the code and move it just a little bit to get what I need. And last but not least, go ahead and take the time to learn some regex. Usually that'll come from a pain point. You're not just going to sit down and read a book on regex and say, okay, I got it. I know everything. You're going to run into a brick wall and you're going to say, if I could just do this one thing, that would make my life so much easier. And then you'll go look up the regex. How do I do that one thing in regex? Okay, and then you add that to the tool belt. And pretty soon, you got a nice tool belt filled with different regex tricks. So this is kind of the last step here, is to fill in blanks with JSL. And don't forget, you can put JSL wrappers around MATLAB, SAS, R, Python. So if you have code libraries that already solve certain problems for you, hey, use them. Take that, wrap the JSL around it, and now you're processing just like you were before, but you can easily throw the results into a data table. So that's I hope that was useful. I don't know if that's quite what you're looking for, Julian. I was struggling here to come up with what might be good. I thank you for the show, and my beeper's going off, so I'm going to hand it back to you. Thanks, Julian.
Thanks so much, Brady. That was perfect. And I'll just add one thing that I think Brady maybe is too humble to say. A lot of people come to Brady with their data struggles. And so one way you can think like Brady, I think, is trying to be the person people come to with their data struggles. And that means seeking out challenges. You know, one way, if you don't work with people at your company who use JMP or don't come to you with their problems, go to the community, community.jmp.com. Look at the problems that people have and try to come up with an inventive solution. You know, as Brady said, a lot of these things are born out of not just practice, but having a need. And sometimes we don't have that need ourselves, but if we find it in other people's challenges, then you can get that experience. You can come up with that reason to learn regex. You come up with that reason to play with those column utilities, challenge yourself. And so one way you can get to think like Brady is put yourself in the situations like Brady is all the time with trying to solve other people's problems. So thank you so much, Brady, for that episode and on all your contributions to the show. In our next segment, we have Mike Anderson back to finish off his series, and today he's going to take us through the last things he wished somebody told him when he started using JMP.
Hey, everybody. So we're here at the end. We've been through the first 4 things that I wish I had told someone when I had started using JMP. Just to recap what we've covered so far, always start with a graph. Remember the 4-step workflow into using JMP. Starting with a graph, look at the graph, ask questions about what you see, and push the red triangle, the answer button. And that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about today as well. The 4th thing, don't underestimate the distribution platform. There's a lot of power in that platform to get a lot of answers out of your analysis, out of your data. But today I want to talk about and originally when I wrote this blog series, there were 2 blog posts on this. The first one was about, I called it the secret of the JMP masters. And then the second one I called the other secret to the JMP masters. And those are what I want to talk about today. Also, we'll have some time at the end. So if you got questions you want me to try and answer live, find the Q&A in Zoom, and we will take those questions before I close up and hand it back to Julian. So let's talk about what the first secret of the JMP masters. The first secret of the JMP masters is that they save their work. And you may think that's a little glib, but the real answer is that they save their work in a very specific way. And by save their work here, I mean they save their scripts back to the data table. They use JMP's auto code generation, auto macro writing, if you're comfortable with Excel capabilities. Let's have a look at what that does. First of all, I want to show you the endpoint. If you've ever seen me in a demo, I've got in my data table a huge volume of these little titles, these little buttons. And each one of those is a macro that I've saved. Each one of those is an analysis that I've done. So I don't have to do all the mouse clicks again. All I have to do is go over and click one of these buttons to generate a new instance of that report. So for instance, if I wanted to do this fit y by x again, it pops it right back up for me where I left off, or where it was when I saved it. So let's have a look at how we do that. And there's incredible power to this, kind of dovetailing with what Brady was talking about. If there are a number of analyses that you do, this is a great way to save time. And in fact, this one trick was the starting point on my journey for learning how to use JSL. When I did this, I took an analysis that was taking the person I took the project over from. It took them about 2 days to put together a report. And just by saving out the scripts for the different graphics for this report, I cut that down to about 45 minutes because I was able to, as part of that, automate the data import and just spent my time tweaking and tuning up the report, getting it ready for publication. So let's look at how I did that. Well, here, I've got a graph builder report that I've created, and I've actually put quite a bit of work into this. I've got a column switcher over here so I can switch between different variables. I've done some formatting. I've worked with the axes and things like that. Actually, I'm going to hide the legend because I don't want that. There, that's better. And I don't want to have to do that over again. So following the 4-step jump workflow, in this case, I've created the graph. I've looked at it. It's a nice graph. Step 3, how do I not have to do that again? Well, I'm going to go to step 4, push the answer button. So if I come up to the red triangle button by Graph Builder, way down at the bottom here, there's this Save Script submenu. And I want to show you 2 different things you can do with this. The first is the one that when I teach people who are starting to use JMP, this is the one I teach them. I teach them to save script to data table, always. And in fact, when I'm coaching them through how to do an analysis for the first time, that's the end point. It's not, hey, I got this nice graph. Okay, we'll save it back to the data table. I want you to do that every single time. So we go save script to data table. And in this case, because I've renamed the graph, it takes that as the name of the report or of the script. And that's actually handy in a lot of cases. In this case, I'm just going to rename it. So I'm going to call it Mikey's Neat Graph. And I'm going to click OK. Now, if I come back to the data table and I come all the way to the bottom, there is a new entry in that list of scripts, list of saved analyses. And when I push the green button, I get a new copy of that analysis. There's so many things that you can do using this one capability. If you have another data set that has the same column names, you can just right-click on one of these scripts and say copy, and then paste it over into the new data, into the other data table, and it will rerun the analysis on that new data. If you update your data table using some of the data cleanup techniques Brady was talking about before, you can rerun the analysis and see what those changes have done and how those changes impact your analyses that you've saved. One of the really interesting things you can do with these, though, is when you go a little bit further down this Save Script to Data Table menu. I'm not going to use, Save Script menu. I'm not going to use Save Script to Data Table. I'm going to use Save Script to Script Window. And what it does is it writes what would be a very challenging thing to longhand in JSL, but it writes a script for me. Now I'm going to come and I'm going to open up another analysis. And I'm going to go to the red triangle for that. And I'm going to say Save Script to Script Window. If I come back to my script window, I've got 2 different analyses. I've got one right here for my fit Y by X. And I've got one up here that has all the customizations that I did in Graph Builder. And now when I run this, and I'm just going to use the jump command or the Mac keyboard shortcut, just Control R. It gives me both of those in one mouse click. If I wanted to be fancy about it, I could select all. I'm just going to use Control A and copy. And then I'm going to come in and create a new script. If I want to do this longhand, I just come under the red triangle and say New Script. And I'm going to say Mikey's Neat Combo Script. And I'm going to paste that in. I'm going to say OK. And now I click Run and I get those together. In fact, you can look in the JMP Scripting Index under Help Scripting Index. And if you look under the Window command, you can actually wrap all of those analyses that you're creating into a single window or into multiple windows to make it easier for you to manage them. I got my first question that just came in. If you have a script with one set of row selections in the data table, will the row states also be saved? No, they won't. But what you could do is use the local data filter instead of the global data filter. So if you've selected things using a global data filter or using some criteria based in the data table, you can set up a local data filter, and that local data filter, and if you've got a selection already populated, so for instance, if I select batch ID and I select a particular combination of batch IDs, those will be captured in from the local data filter. And there's another neat trick in a local data filter that you can use where once you've got it set up here, or if I grab a bunch of these, so this is filtered out. If I come under if I come under favorites, I can add a favorite, and that favorite will save those pre-populated conditions. So if you got a really fancy local data filter, you don't want to have to go through it every single time. You can save it as a favorite, and that when you save the script back to the data table, those favorites will be saved as well. It's a great question. I'm going to close these up here. So, thing 5, save your work. Use the red triangle menu, save script to data table, and save script to script window. Incredibly powerful and a massive time saver. Now let's go on to not the very last thing, but we'll call it close to the very last thing, the penultimate thing. Special keys. And when I did this in the blog series, we talked about this as the broadcast key, which is incredibly powerful. But there's a second one I want to show you as well. But let's talk about the broadcast key first. Now I've got here in this data, in this this fit Y by X. In fact, let's start a little bit easier. Let's start with distributions. In this distribution platform, I have a bunch of windows, and I would like to see some of the statistics for these, but I've got them turned off. If I were to follow the jump workflow, I would have to go to the red triangle for each of these and turn on the statistics one at a time. But there's a trick that you can use. And the trick involves using one finger to hold down, and on the Mac, it's the Command key. On Windows, it's the Control key. Mac Command, Windows Control. Okay? I'm going to hold down that Command or Control key, depending on what your system is, and I'm going to select what I want to do. I'm going to come down and show display options. I am going to show summary statistics. And it set up the summary statistics for everything that was appropriate. So time, it looks like here, isn't an appropriate one. This is probably a frequency chart. And same with the shift and same with the solvent supplier. Those are frequency charts. But the broadcast key, what it does is it looks in the report in a window and will try and give whatever command you've selected from the red triangle menu, from the right-click menu, from even just copy-paste, like copy access property, copy column properties, and paste. Any of those things that you do, you can send to every other part of the report and save yourself a lot of time. Let me show you another example of how that works. In this case, I actually don't want, well, we'll go back to this one. This is probably a better one to show this. I've got a lot of things being shown in this report, and really I want to hide most of them. I don't want to show the parameter estimates. So I'm going to hold down my Control key, and I'm just going to click the little collapse arrow on on that outline node. And it closes all the appropriate ones. Over here, this is a one-way analysis. It doesn't have that node, so it didn't close it. I can do that with just the linear fit entirely. Just close that out. If I wanted to fit something else, I'm going to come to the red triangle. I'm going to say turn on histogram borders. I can, and again, every command I'm doing here, I'm holding down the Control key to let me do those options. Now, if you have a lot of preferences and a lot of things that you want to change about a report all at once, there's a modifier that you can use. This modifier is it's one, I don't use it very often, but it does come in handy from time to time. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down, when you click on the red triangle menu, you're going to hold down the Alt key on Windows, and on Mac, it's the Option key. So Mac, Option, Alt, Windows. I'm going to hold down the Option key and I'm going to click on a red triangle. And it gives me a pop-up for all of the different preferences all the different red triangle options that I can choose. So I can say, you know what, I don't actually want summary statistics. I do want to see the quantiles for this. Why not? Let's show percents. Let's show counts. Then why not? Let's fit a normal distribution. Let's click OK. And so for that one analysis, I got a lot going on here, but for that one analysis, it's done everything for me. I'm going to turn off the stack here just so I can have a little bit less going on. Let me turn all that off real quick. Actually, I'm gonna practice what I preach here. I'm gonna close all of these, and I'm gonna run the distribution out of my saved scripts. Distribution right there. The real power with that Alt key comes when you combine it with the Control key. So I'm going to hold down Alt and Control at the same time. And what I've effectively done is said, I want you to broadcast all of these commands to all of the platforms, all of the parts of JMP that are open that will accept it, all of the reports or all of the elements within this report that will accept it. So I'm going to turn on summary statistics. I'm going to do horizontal layout because I prefer histograms being horizontal. I'm going to turn off the histogram. I'm going to turn on the shadowgram. Why? I don't know, just because. And I'm going to click OK. And now if we come up, oh, whoops, I turned off the histogram. That's why it's not working anymore. So we'll show the histogram now. There, that's better. And again, I used the Control key to fix that problem, but you can see that you can quickly format a lot of things within a particular report using the Control key and the Alt key. And I want to take just a couple of minutes. Julian, if you could give me a 2-minute timer, we'll take 2 minutes to give people a chance to write in their questions, and we'll answer any questions that people may have, and then I'll close out after that. So Julian, could you give me a 2-minute, please? All right, we're back. We got a couple of questions in here. The first question is, can I repeat what the specific power of the Alt key is? Well, okay, so here's how this works. The Alt key, anytime you hold down the Alt key, or on Mac, it's the Option key, and you click on a red triangle menu, it shows all of the options. So it kind of explodes it into a click list, into a punch list of things that you can turn on and off all at once. So this saves you from having to go red triangle menu, summary statistics, red triangle menu, shadowgram, red triangle menu, show percents, all that stuff. You can come through and say summary statistics, show percents, shadowgram, turn off vertical, and click OK, and it will apply all those at once. The other power so that's the Alt/Option key, and then the Control key or Command key on the Mac. When you combine those two, it lets you say, I want to see the summary statistics, I want to see the shadowgram, I want to show percents, and I don't want to see vertical. Click OK. It applies all of those together. So Option provides all of the options under the red triangle menu. Control provides is called the broadcast key. So I got a question about dashboard platform. Let's see, let me read it here really quick. Filter option, can user interact with, turn off filters. Yes. So yes, we do have some capabilities built into with the questions with Dashboard Builder or with dashboards in JMP in general. If we're talking about JMP Live, the capabilities associated with dashboards are much improved from version 14. We have column switchers, we have local data filters, and a number of capabilities built into those. HTML5 just by itself also inherited a few of those things, but some of the things require the JMP backend that comes with JMP Live to do. So I would say, kind of Liz, in short, yeah, there was a fairly significant leap forward in the capabilities for dashboarding in 15. So I guess that brings me to the last thing I want to share. And this is truly probably the very last thing. When I did the blog series, I finished off the blog series with a bit of an homage to Douglas Adams. And so I thought it would be appropriate to do this. I want you to remember that we're talking here about, in this series, about people who've just started using JMP. And one of the things that, with any new software, people have is this kind of a fear, there's a stigma, there's almost this analytical paralysis where you just don't know where to start. Or you see all these different options coming at you and you don't know what to do. And this is the last thing I would say to people who have that kind of problem. Don't panic. And above all, check the JMP community. Julian, back to you.
Thanks so much, Mike. That's really good advice. And yeah, do check out community.jmp.com/JMPOnAir to see all of Mike's previous episodes recorded. And we'll link over to his blog series too, so you can revisit all of the things he wishes he had learned when he first started using JMP. Mike, thanks so much for being on the show. In our next segment, we have Artie Meidel back here to do a mindful moment for us.
Hello, and welcome to the Mindful Moment. We're going to take a break, and we'll be breathing and moving a little bit. And we'll be doing all of this mindfully. So what that means is paying attention to the present moment on purpose and without judgment. So let's begin. So you can do this either sitting or standing. If you're sitting, just shift forward on your chair so that your feet can come to rest on the ground. And then lengthen your spine, relax your shoulders down, close your eyes. If you're standing, your arms are relaxing down by your side. And if you're sitting, your hands are resting on top of your thighs. And we'll just begin by taking a few deep breaths, 3 breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. So let's begin. Inhale, filling fully, and open the mouth, exhale. Just letting go. Again, inhaling and exhaling. Release. Last time like this, inhale. Open the mouth, let it go. Now begin breathing in and out through the nose. And we're going to work on a little breath exercise called equalized breath. We'll be trying to match the inhale to the exhale, and we'll use a 5 count. So it'll be a 5 count inhale and a 5 count exhale, and I'll do the counting along with you. So inhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last time like this, inhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Just breathe normally in and out through the nose. Your eyes are closed. Bring your awareness to the end of your nose, the tip of your nose, and then begin to draw circles as if you have a pencil at the end of your nose, just making little circles or big circles, drawing circles in the air with the tip of your nose, going in one direction to begin. And the next time you come over to the right side, just pause. Feel for the stretch on the left side of the neck. And then reverse your circle. So using the tip of your nose, draw circles in the opposite direction. Feeling that loosening of the neck. And then when you can, stop on the left side this time. Feel for the stretch on the right side of the neck. Turn your head to center now, and then blink your eyes open. Bring your hands to heart center or to the center of your chest, palm to palm. Clasp your fingers, and then press your palms away, straightening your arms. With an inhale, lift your arms up into the air, stretching up. You can look up if you like. And then on the exhale, lean to the side. The inhale brings you back up, and then the exhale, lean to the other side. We'll do that one more time. So inhale, come up, and then exhale, lean. Inhale, reach up, press the palms away up to the sky, ceiling, and then exhale, lean. Inhale brings you back up, and then the exhale brings the hands to in front of the chest. Now make a little bowl of your hands, or a flower, you can think of it either way. Pinkies are touching, thumbs are touching, and the base of the palms are touching. Relax the shoulders down. This is your inhale. And then the exhale will be to press out wide with your hands. Feel into the fingertips. Now really connecting the breath and the movement, and let the breath lead. So as soon as you feel the inhale coming in, bring the palms or hands in together. And then as soon as the exhale starts, pressing out. So inhale brings the hands together. And then the exhale, press the palms away, press, 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 straighten the arms. And then just do this a few more times in silence with your own breath, really paying attention to when does the exhale start, when does the inhale start, and connect the breath. And if you end up reversing the inhale and the exhale with the movement, no problem. Just keep breathing and connecting the breath to the movement. Once more like this, exhaling out. And then inhale, bring it in. Bring your palms to touch. Thank you so much for joining me with this mindful moment. And may we all be safe. May we all be healthy. May we all be happy. May we all find peace.
Thank you so much, RT. In our next segment, we have Byron Wingard here to take us through our final jump in action, where Byron's going to show us how to annotate control charts.
Wow. All right, Artie, that was awesome. I'm feeling a little lightheaded. Gotta turn down the oxygen a little bit. So, yeah, so today's segment, and I hope I'm broadcasting everything that's cool, we're going to be talking about how to make your control charts rock. There have been a lot of questions recently talking about control charts. They sound like a boring topic, but really they're kind of like the backbone of a lot of our quality systems. So let's talk just a little bit about how to make this work. So first of all, let's just start off with a control chart. I've got a control chart here, basic control chart. But there's some points here that did something interesting. Like, for example, this one's really low and this one's really high. And I need to put some notes on there to let people know that we don't need to panic. So a really classic way of dealing with annotation is just to go to the Tools menu and grab the Annotation tool right here. And so with that Annotate tool, I get crosshairs. And the way we use that is we'll put it right on a point and we'll draw a box. And then we can put in some text. Don't panic. All right. Let's make that a little bigger. All right. And now we've got that point annotated. But you might say, hey, Byron, that's not that great because it's kind of hanging off the corner of the graph. Can you make that any better? Well, check this out. On these boxes, if you do a right click, you can click tagline. And now you've got a tagline and you can add some extra points. And this is a really simple thing to set up. Now, I want to show you one more thing with this annotate that tends to be really helpful. I'm going to do the same thing here. There's this really fantastic point over here. And if I go and I click and I move this around, I need that tagline to get back because nobody knows that I'm talking about that point. With these boxes, if you just put the corner, so I'm putting like the top left-hand corner right on that data point, I can go to tagline and it'll turn that back on again. And wherever that top left-hand corner was, it will attach right back to that point. So this is a pretty good solution for annotating points. And it's important to do this as kind of the last step for the graph because some formatting can kind of make this get a little like changing the axis here or maybe changing the size of this graph. It might kind of lose where those points we're aiming at. So what do you do if that's the case? Let's take another look at this chart, get a fresh copy. Another way to annotate is by using labels. All right, so and this is going to take an extra step, but it's totally worthwhile. So in my data table here, I have this comments column, and I have some comments about different points that are on this graph. So for example, this one here, when I click on it here, or that gets selected in my data table, and I can add a comment in this comment column here. All right, ooh, there we go. So now I've got that comment right there in the comment column. And if I highlight that data point over here in my graph, make sure I hit enter, that label will pop up. Oh, I gotta make this comments column label. So here's comments, and we turn on label. Little tag next to it. That means that label will show up. All right. So now in this graph, I've got this comment too good to be true, and if I click the pin, now it'll pin that comment to that graph. So now if I change anything about that graph, its size, or other things like that, that stays pinned right to that point. Okay, and that's a really convenient way of annotating. Also, it's a little bit more robust. And if I generate this chart again, I'll be able to get that. I'll be able to get these comments back again and add these to my graphs as I go along. Oh wait, now I mentioned you have to add these each time you want them. I can save this script and it'll save to my data table and things like that. But if I make a brand new chart, that new chart won't have that annotation in it. So how do we get that annotation to show up all the time? Well, we're going to use a second label role. So we turned on label for this column. The second thing we need to do is turn on label for the row. So I'm just going to select everything in my data table, and I'm just going to do a right click here, and we're going to label all the rows. So now all my rows are labeled, and you can see in my graph here, every single data point that had a comment attached to it now has all those comments pulled up. All right, so now I've got a way of having these pop up automatically all the time. If I add new data, rerun this chart, even if I make a fresh copy of this chart, all of those annotations stay there, and that's pretty fantastic. But I can already hear Mike Anderson screaming in the background, Byron, there's too much data on that chart. Like it's too much. Like when you add all that detail, it's just getting too kludgy. So what can we do about that? Well, we'll get there. All right. So the other thing that I found really interesting about talking about annotating is that sometimes people have a different idea about what it means to annotate a chart. So, for example, let's turn that off. Here's that same chart, and what a lot of people want to see is a table of the annotations along with the chart. So here I have, these are each of the different comments, and this work in progress happens to be for all of these, and these are the row numbers for each one of those. And so that's another way of annotating this chart. And to build this type of annotation is really pretty simple. We just do control chart. So here's our control chart. I'm going to close that a little bigger there. All right, that looks pretty. All right, and then I'm going to make a tabulate box. And this tabulate box is right here. And what I'd like to do is combine these two. So in this window here, they're both combined. Let's close those. So to get these together in the same window, we can just go to help, and in Windows it's slightly different, but it's the same basic idea. We're just going to combine windows, and I'm going to combine these two things together. Actually, I'm going to do one more thing that's even better. I'm going to put the data table in there also. So now I've got this report, and I've got the graph, I've got the tabulate dashboard over here, and I've got my data all in one window. So I've got this all annotated really cleanly together, and that's pretty slick. But I'm really picky about my visualizations, and so one of the things I like to do is just put this inside of this separate window, just tight together, either like this, or maybe I want to have that below, right? And so I can have that tabulate box in either of these other positions, and this is something that takes just a little bit more to set up. My label strategies here. So if I want to append a box to my data table, I can use a little bit of JSL. And if you've never seen JSL, this looks like crazy stuff, but basically I'm going to make a control chart, and I'm going to use this append to add a tab box to that report. And so that looks like this. So I make this report, that's my object, and I just say append this tab box to it. And it's a really quick and easy way to generate some of those windows. Now, coming back to Mike, hang on a second, I'm just double checking on time because I already forgot when I'm supposed to end. Mike was talking about this idea of, don't make your graphs too bunched up and kludgy a while ago. And so how do I get it so that my graphs only have, say, like the last 50 rows? So let's take an example of that. So here's what I'd like to have. Instead of having all of the graphs, all of the days possible with all those annotations, what I'd really like is to have my control charts come up with only this last 50 rows in the data table. And that would be a really handy thing to have. So let's take a look at what's behind the control of which rows are shown in a control chart. So check this out. I'm going to just make a modification to this chart and kind of zoom in here. So now I've got, maybe the last 50 rows. And let's look at the script for this. So I'm going to save this script to the script window. Make this great big so we can see it really well. All right. So right here, there's this scale box. And you can see here, it says it's set up to be a minimum of 48 and a maximum of 95, kind of like what I've got over here. These things here are really flexible arguments. They're not necessarily like a fixed number. So for example, I could say, I want that to be the number of rows in my table. And maybe +2, so I get a little space at the end. And I want this to be the last 50 rows in the table. So we could say, we call that n rows minus 50. Okay. And now when we run this control chart, there we get the last 50 observations and a little padding at the end so we can see the comments really well. And this is just a really slick trick to get your graphs to come out the way you always want them. When you're done with this, if you say save script to the data table, that script gets saved back here. And so now whenever you run that, you're going to get the last 50 rows in your table. Sorry, I told you something wrong. I said save this script. You want to save this script window where you made the edits back. So like if you did that save script to data table, you just do a Control-Alt or copy that, and then you come over here and we're just going to edit that and paste that in there. So now every time I run this, it'll have those last 50 rows. And if we check that script, there's our n rows minus 50 for our scale box. All right. Let me clean some things up here. I know that was far out there. Let's do one more thing. All right. So some of these things that I'm talking about are already in blogs on the community.jump.com. For example, this idea of using a relative x-axis scale. There's a blog on community.jump.com where I posted really detailed descriptions and some example code that's pretty handy. The next level of annotation is also going to take on some scripting. And so let's take a look at an example chart here. Right. This is a little bit fancier way of annotating a control chart. And I like this. This is like a phased control chart, except I'm not changing the control limits between the phases. I'm just drawing a line here and I'm labeling that line. Okay, and this is really, really handy when you're starting to do like root cause analysis, things like that, where you're looking at trying to define windows around when a process changed or areas that you're investigating. And the backbone of this, just to set this up, is the same kinds of things we've done before. We have a comment. So here's my my comment column right here. Okay, and then I have another column to control when points are going to show up. So how did I get these lines in this graph? Well, I want to show you something that's a little bit in the deep jump. Okay, so let's do this. I'm just going to right-click in here on the white space, and we're going to go to Customize. And this dialog comes up. And in this dialog, there's some examples for like different templates or samples of code you could add to a graph. And that happens to be a script. So like if you're going to set this up for yourself, you just hit the plus button, and now you have an empty script that you can go ahead and add things to. And in my script here, all I'm doing is saying for each row, put a comment in, or put a vertical line at the ID variable, this one here, if it's not missing. So anytime I've got a comment, it draws a line. And then I'm also saying for each row, if not missing, then put the comment in there. And I have it set up to be moved down a certain number of points. So it's a pretty straightforward idea to get at, to add, to make some pretty slick charts. And again, this is going to take a little bit of understanding of JSL and a little bit of understanding of how to customize a chart. And if you want to see more information on that, you can just go over to community.jump.com, and there's a blog on how to set that up. And in this blog, I go through the steps, just like I mentioned here, of how to add that, and then some example script for adding that formatting. And that's already set up, and I think those links are already attached to this session. So they're all ready to go. So those are a couple of different strategies for how to make your control chart rock. Let's see. There's one more thing I'd like to talk about. And Julian, could you let me know how much time I have left?
You are 54 seconds over, but tell us that one last thing.
Oh,
You're
okay.
all the way up in space. You've come this far.
It's been a long journey to get here, guys. All right, so the last thing, and this is something that I've written another blog about, of course, and this is a massive productivity gain. You can save these control charts as graphic files. And once you've saved a control chart as graphic file, you can use an insert and link function in your PowerPoint slides and Word documents to pick up that graphic file and stick it in your Word document. And the really cool thing about this, and this again, it's another blog on community.jump.com. The really cool thing about that is that after you can use Jump to make graphic images, and then when you open up your Word document, since it's inserted and linked, it'll grab that current version of that graphic file and automatically insert it into your document. So when you can make killer control charts that rock, and you can have PowerPoint or Word insert those automatically into your documents. And so using the kind of the power of both systems together can give you some massive productivity gains with those. And I'm going to leave it there. I got to say one thing though, Julian. This whole thing that you set up has just been amazing, and I just want to say it's been outstanding. So thank you for your time this afternoon. And if you have questions, send them along, and we'll get those answered later on. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Byron. And yeah, you can get to all of Byron's resources at community.jump.com/jumponair. And he mentioned a number of blogs at community.jump.com that you should absolutely check out. So again, community.jump.com/jumponair, or just head over to community.jump.com. In our next segment, we have Ross Matusalem back to do a final edition of Help, where he shows us help resources in Jump that can help us get answers.
Great, thanks, Julian, and hi, everyone. Welcome to the final for now, edition of Help, a review of Jump's help resources and how to use them effectively. Today, we're going to review some help resources you can find on our website at jump.com, which I'll drag in here. So our website contains, for example, under the Learn Jump tab, a range of help resources suited to different situations or different needs. So whatever type of help you're looking for, you can probably find it here on the website. But when you go here seeking help, you might wonder, of all these resources I'm seeing, which one should I even check out, or at least check out first? So I'm going to do my best to answer that question, at least with respect to a few of our help resources right now. So we're going to focus here at the Learn Jump tab, though I do want to point out that we also have this Support tab over here that might be appropriate for you sometimes. So if we just check out the overview, you'll see that the support materials includes more technical things like the technical documentation and notes, systems requirements, and things like that. So head on over to support if that's the type of help you're looking for. But we're going to stick over at Learn Jump, which has more of the materials kind of geared toward making you a more effective Jump user. So we see a number of things that we've already discussed on Jump On Air, like the Statistically Thinking course STIPs, the new user welcome kit. But if you want to learn more about these, go ahead and check out some previous Jump on Air recordings on the user community. So instead, right now, let's direct our attention to a couple other help resources and specifically when or in which situation you might want to use them. So we're going to take a relatively common situation to start. Let's say that we know of a specific thing we want to do in JMP, like say build a bar chart or run a simple linear regression, and we just don't know where to look or what to click on. So in those situations, your best bet is to head on over to the Learning Library. The Learning Library contains a lot of quick, 1 or 2 minute help videos and one-page PDF guides. They're organized by a different topic here. So if we wanted to do, say, simple regression, I would check out the correlation and regression section and scroll on down until I see what I want to do, simple linear regression here. You can see we have a quick instructional video. Let me just mute this real fast, though if I hadn't, you'd hear our very own Julian Paris walking you through in just about 2 minutes how to use JMP's tools to do a simple regression. And once we're done, we could even check out the simple one-page guide here and download this to take it with us so that we have a reminder of what we saw. So anytime we need to remember, hey, how do I do a regression, we can just consult this real fast and we're off to the races. So that's the Learning Library. Quick help, quick instructions for when you just need to know where to go, what to click on to do something specific in JMP. But sometimes quick instructions aren't necessarily what we need. Maybe we're relatively new to some part of JMP, let's say DOE, and really what we're looking for is some help in understanding the basics of DOE and how it works in JMP. Or even if we already know the basics, maybe we just want to hone our skills and really master it. So if that's what you're looking for, check out our Mastering JMP webinar series. So these are a series of hour-long webinars on a variety of topics. They're organized by level of technicality or by application area, so you can find which one you're looking for. Let's check out the DOE webinars. You can see we have a number here from basic all the way to advanced. If I were just getting started, maybe I would take a look at the essentials of designing experiments. The brief description looks good, so let's give it a watch. And here we find our friend Phil Kay giving us a walkthrough of the basic idea behind DOE and how to use JMP's DOE tools effectively, all in about 1 hour. As I briefly mentioned, these webinars are also available live. You can always check out the upcoming live webinars right here. Shameless plug, in just about an hour, I'm going to be doing one on JMP 15's new platform called Explore Patterns, so feel free to drop in on that at 2 p.m. Eastern today. The big benefit of coming to these live webinars is that you actually get to engage in Q&A with the presenter, which can be pretty valuable. But anyway, so this is Mastering JMP. Once again, this is really good for when you want an in-depth walkthrough of some of JMP's functionality to help you really hone your skills and develop mastery. Now, finally, sometimes it's the case that we're not really looking for help with JMP. We just want some help maybe with some statistical concepts in general. We all use statistics, but maybe we don't necessarily have a strong stats background. So when that's the case, under Learn JMP, you might want to check out the Statistics Knowledge Portal, what we call SKIP affectionately. So here you find brief articles on foundational statistical concepts like correlation, regression, ANOVA. This is a relatively new resource. We're adding to it continually, plenty more content coming soon, so please come back and continue to check it out. But let's just take a look at some of the existing content to see what you might find here. Here's the linear regression page, and you'll see that what we have is a brief, visual, relatively non-technical introduction to the statistical concept of linear regression. It's not about JMP, it's just about the statistics, and it's written for a very general audience. So come check out SKIP if you'd like brief, non-technical introductions to basic statistical concepts. So those are the 3 resources I wanted to point you to. Once again, under Learn JMP, you're going to find a lot of additional help resources geared towards different needs and use cases, but the 3 we just discussed can get you a pretty long way in becoming a more effective JMP user. So that's whether you know what you want to do and just need a quick guide on where to go and what to click on. Once again, that's the Learning Library. Whether you're looking to develop a deeper understanding of JMP's capabilities in some domain and how to use them most effectively, that's Mastering JMP. Or if you need just an accessible primer on a foundational statistical concept, head on over to the Statistics Knowledge Portal. So that's it for help. Thanks, everybody. Julian, close us out.
Outstanding. Thanks so much, Ross. Yeah, do check out all of those resources Ross mentioned. You can view his segments, all his help segments, going back to the very start at community.jump.com/jumponair. That's actually where you can view all of our content from our first season of Jump On Air. And we really do hope you check out all the past episodes you might have missed, the segments that you loved, and share them with colleagues. There is a survey coming out to you later today, and we do hope you tell us what you loved, what you think we could have done better, and what you think we should do next. So Jump On Air Season 1 has wrapped up, but we don't know what's going to happen for Season 2, and we hope that you can shape a little bit of our direction. So do take the time to fill out the survey. It should only take you about 5 minutes, and you really will shape what's to come. So please tell us what you think. Follow us on all of our social media channels. We're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. We have a lot to share, and we share often. And finally, I just want to say a thank you for joining us for this first season. I thought about how I wanted to end this, and I think I want to end by not having it feel like an ending, because I think Season 2 could come back. We may do other things with this, but no matter what, at Jump, we're here to connect with you. And so whether we do it via Jump On Air, whether it's through mastering, whether it's through discovery, or any of the things that we do from our side to connect with you, we're here alongside you. So I guess I'll just say one final time, I hope you're staying safe during all of this. It's a very interesting time that we're in, and I hope you felt safe and are staying safe. I hope you and your family and all your loved ones are staying healthy, or if in the unfortunate event you do get sick, that you recover real quickly. We hope you're staying close. I think we live in a very special time where we're able to connect with people at great distances and make it feel pretty close. If this all were happening 100 years ago, things would feel a lot different. And I hope you're keeping your distance, but I hope you make sure that distance doesn't make you feel alone, because more than anything that's happened in all my lifetime, I feel like we're all in the same thing together. And if there's anything that makes distances feel small, it's knowing that there's somebody out there right now who's going through the exact same thing as you. And so remember that we're all in this together, and we're all going to come out the other side that much better for it. So until next time, everyone, take care. Be safe.
Before we sign off completely, I want to add my thank you as well. Can you put us all in gallery view? Can you do that for everybody? I think probably a lot of our audience has already dropped off, but I think there's probably still some of us left around. And I just wanted to say thank you from me as well. It has been an outstanding series. Season 1, you jumped in right at the start of all this to pull us all together. Not just you, but a whole bunch of other people, but pull us all together and have done a fantastic job. We are very grateful. I think the audience has been grateful. And I just want to add my thank you to you as well. I'm going to grab screen sharing because I have taken and this is proof that why you should be doing this and not me, because you would have been much smoother at this than I will be. But I do want to share, I did put together a quick highlights reel. I want to share with everybody still on the line and with you. So with that, let's see if I can make this play.
And we have a really outstanding lineup here. Fantastic. Yeah, let's do it. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Pete and Mary. Fantastic. 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 Thank you so much, Wendy. Fantastic. 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 Outstanding. Fantastic. Fantastic. Outstanding. 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 Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rob. Outstanding. Outstanding. Fantastic. Outstanding. 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 Fantastic. Outstanding. 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 Fantastic. Outstanding. Outstanding, Dan. Outstanding. Fantastic. Outstanding. Fantastic. Thanks, Chef Jeff. Outstanding. Outstanding. Fantastic. Outstanding. Fantastic. Outstanding. 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 Fantastic. Outstanding. 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 Yeah, outstanding. Outstanding. Fantastic. Outstanding. Fantastic. Outstanding. Fantastic. Outstanding. 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 Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was such an interesting presentation.
Indeed, it was an
I wear the same shirt and I say the same thing, so I might as well maintain consistency.
Well, I think there's somebody right outside your door, and I don't want you to be startled when they come in. So if you would make sure that they can get in the door, and it's a little something for you.
Hi everybody,
oh, look,
I am here
with
to
a fantastic
present the
presenter.
Statsy Award for outstanding creator of a statistics series. This Statsy Award goes to Julian Paris. I do want to make a quick caveat that the Academy spelled his name wrong, so a replacement is in the mail. But in the meantime, this Statsy Award goes to you, Julian. Total coincidence that I used the word outstanding on here, but outstanding, fantastic. This is for you.
Yay, Julian.
Well, thank you, everyone. I don't even know what to say. Outstanding. Fantastic. Outstanding. Outstanding.
I think you need a T-shirt,
Outstanding.
Julian, that says fantastic, outstanding, fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic on the front, outstanding in the back.
Yep, there you go. I like it.
Yeah,
I know
that's
she
not
can't hear us,
suggestive
but
at all.
thank Margot for her participation there. We appreciate it. And
They say
Julian,
thank
thank you
you.
for
I can't hear them
everything.
now. I'll go listen in the other room. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, Margot. All right. Julian, again, my congratulations. Excellent job.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
Great job, Julian.
Thanks for everyone who stuck on with us.
Oh, yeah. We were like herding cats, and I know you did a really good job, so maybe you should get a Rancher's Award or something.
There you
Maybe
go.
so.
And with that, we
Thank
really
you,
will
everyone.
sign off.
We'll actually sign off.
Julian.
Bye.
Take care. Goodbye, everyone.